Welcome everyone for joining us for the first of 2024's webinar series. We're great to get it back up and running again. And it's a great pleasure that we've got the founder of Jonge, Hank Jonge, joining us again today to come back and have a chat with us again. So welcome, Hank.
Thanks, Ash.
So today we're going to have a little bit of a look, do a little bit of a, what's happened in the last 12 months, pull out our crystal ball and have a bit of a look at what we think is going to happen. And then wrap in some case study work in there as we go along, as we often do. So, Hank, we've certainly got off to a bit of a wild start this year, and it feels like it's a lot more than 6 or 7 weeks since the start of the year.
Look, you're not wrong, Ashley. It's really been a very, very unique start to the year. The amount of aggression or the change in attitude from the ATO has just been phenomenal. So obviously it's been it is what we're going to see for the next year or two. Payment plans that have gone into default, don't worry about renewing them. It's a strong possibility of that not happening. They are really on the hunt to bring these companies to finality. So the attitude whereby a few months ago we could renegotiate deals and so on, that's out. So the pressure's back is on, and I reckon it's on harder than I've ever seen. I've been doing this now for 18 years, and this is harder than I've ever seen, Ash.
So, Hank, we'll get to have a look at sort of the future in a minute. I just want to talk about, it's been 12 months since I've had you on here on the webinar, and so I thought I'd get a bit of a perspective of what you think the last 12 months have been like.
Sure. Well, look, to be honest with you, I thought there would have been a lot more in the insolvency space last year. Now, that's not saying that there hasn't been an uptick from COVID, because there certainly has been, and there has been more insolvency. But there's still a lot of people that are out there that have got difficulties that aren't dealing with those. There's a lot of resilient small business operators out there, you might say. But it really does seem to be, last year anyway, a lot of people were kicking that can down the road. And I guess that's probably one of the reasons why the ATO has attacked this year with such gusto.
Yeah, no, well, I'd have to agree from what we've seen that, that people in small businesses seem to have been able to get away with a lot more than I was certainly expecting to happen last year. That, I'll give you an example of a client down here in Melbourne, got a $5.5 million tax debt, hasn't really had a solid payment plan in place for 9 months, and we still haven't seen a CSD on that client. Now, they've issued DPNs, which they've let expire, but they're not ramping up. They haven't ramped up yet to really smash the client, even without a payment plan going on.
Yeah, well, it's true, and I've seen similar files up here where there's some that have been attacked attacked is the wrong word, but have been pursued quite vigorously, and some that have fallen through the cracks, but I think that's what's going to be caught up on this year. The ATO are running a very, very systemized process now. There's no mucking around. There's very limited time between each of the steps. We're often finding that DPNs are coming out swiftly, followed by CSDs. It's quite an organised streamline of these going through. Now, I think DPNs is something that's been very, very interesting over the last 12 months. I think, without a doubt, I've seen more DPNs issued than, again, in my entire time in this industry. So they've definitely been the flavour of the month, ramping up to protect the government's money as much as possible. So, I think I think there's been a lot of people getting away with not paying the ATO for a long time, and they're certainly ramping down on that this year.
Yeah, and I think the interest, I mean, that's good for clients that they've had more time to try and get their house in order. And, you know, the one that I was talking about in Melbourne, they have engaged us to do a restructure and get things done. So it's given us a little bit more time, but eventually that's going to run out. But I know you and I were talking the other day about the whole, how much we've seen in DPNs, but interestingly, in the last 12 months, how many of those DPNs people haven't done anything about. You know, like before COVID, if a client got a DPN, they'd be on our front door and going, what do we need to do in 21 days? I don't think in my career in the business that I've ever seen as many DPNs allowed to lapse with no activity going on.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there, without a doubt. Yeah, it's quite unique, isn't it? Because, you know, pre-COVID, you're right. We'd be talking to our referring accountants and so on, and you would get that call that clients just received the DPN, and what do we do? And we come up and we deal with it. I guess there's just been such a number of them that have been issued, and that have and a lot of people have got this resilience that they believe that they can either trade through and pay that debt, or maybe they believe that that the ATO isn't going to chase it. But I think without a doubt, we are definitely in all our offices seeing more and more of these expired DPNs floating around, and you know, when I think about it, I suppose it's really that it's based on hope that they believe that they can trade through. So I think some of the discussions that I've had with some of these people really come down to a belief that they believe it'll sort itself out. They'll trade through. The profit will come back into the business, and maybe post-COVID that business may have changed. And I don't know if that's being taken into consideration quite so much. And sometimes it's not often based on facts, but just on the hope of that it will just return.
Yeah, and I think it's unfortunately, I'm not sure that hope, what we're starting to see this year is that hope hasn't really panned out the way that people have thought. You know, I'm not an economist, but and I will never pretend to be an economist, but what I think I'm seeing is that a lot of people are waiting for the business to go back to what it was pre-COVID. And in my opinion, in my world, we're in a new economy now, a post-COVID economy, and that means our businesses need to look different. They need to be different to be able to make some money. We've got, you know, the interest rates, the impact of interest rates are starting to kick in. Cost of living is a buzzword at the moment that's causing a whole lot of grief, and we're seeing a lot of businesses are actually dragging more money out personally, so that they can survive. So I think all of these things are starting to work against small business, and they've now got this legacy debt that's on them personally that they didn't have before.
Yeah, I reckon it's probably a unique and a good area for our accountants and financial advisors out there who to work with their clients to really analyse that business and to have a look and see, you know, if it is that model moving forward the right model. Does it need some modification? Does it need some adjustment to be able to survive? Now, like as most people that know me would know, I'm a true optimist, but it's really going to be a tough market out there for the next few years, and it's difficult to make a clear dollar. And what I mean, from what we can see out there, there's a lot of businesses that are running their income comes in, it goes into the bank, it goes out to pay the expenses, and to have that clear profit available to clear that legacy debt is going to be quite difficult. And to be frank, good net profit in business is going to be, if that's going to be needed to pay back old tax, that really needs to be considered. So, like I said, I reiterate the fact that I think it's with clients out there that have got these DPNs that are looking at trading through. and dealing with those, because that's the situation that they're in. It's a great opportunity for our accountants out there to really take some time and have a look at that business, have a look at cash flows. How's it going to work? Is it something that that we're going to be able to work through, and does that business need tweaking? That's what my thoughts are there, Ash.
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, you and I are definitely not ones to cry foul that the world's going to fall apart. It's more about trying to be proactive and get ahead of it. But I think for me, talking to some of our clients and some of our referring accountants, they're getting a lot of people saying that 5 years ago I could do this and I was making this amount of money. They're the ones that you probably need to sit down and do that analysis that you're talking about. And get them to really look at what their business looks like today. I think how you structure your business, how you deal with what the new market looks like. So I think that's going to be a really a good conversation to have with businesses that where the directors are still going, I just need to go back to 5 years ago. The reality is we're in a new market. We're not in a market from 5 years ago, and what's it going to look like today? So Hank, with what you've said about expired DPNs, what can our listeners do if they have a client who has been living with that hope, and they may need to, and they've got these DPNs that have expired?
Well, I think the easiest way to answer that is to have a look through, at examples of some of our clients, and there's a number, to be honest. But just looking at one that springs to mind, we had a situation. We had a company. There were a number of directors that received DPNs in about August last year. When they came in, they spoke to their accountant, but ultimately they believed that the business would be would pick up enough that they could trade through, and that they could pay that total debt. Now that debt was circa 1.4. Now the DPNs equated to probably about 950,000, so not the entire amount. So 6 months down the track, they're struggling to maintain that payment plan now. That's been put into place. So the DPNs have expired, obviously, and payment plan in place, and they're struggling. So when they spoke to their accountant again, they called us in to have a chat. When they did, we wanted to look at the options, but in truth, they still had some hope. So the directors certainly weren't at the point of walking away, but they were hoping that they would come up with some new ways of dealing with things until it got better. Now, the first thing we did was to have a look at those DPN liabilities and see where they were sitting. Now, the company had been making payments over that last 6 months, so they believed that those debts would have been coming down, but where they weren't coming down quite as much as everyone had thought.
So, Hank, I'm sure most people listening would know that that's the case, but can I get you just to expand on why it wasn't coming down as much as you thought?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the simple way, and what's really important for us to understand, that if we really want to know if what the position is for one of our clients, to log on to their MyGov accounts gives us some really good indication of what DPNs are out there for PAYG, GST superannuation, and we can see at a point of time what the outstanding amount is. So it can be monitored quite carefully. Now, the reality was, in this situation, it wasn't reducing by a large percentage each time, because the payments were coming off the oldest debt. So, the payments for the current BASs, of course, were coming off the current BASs, and the payment plan was coming off the oldest debt. So it really was a reality check for our clients.
So no doubt, I think a lot of people would assume that it would go against the DPN first, and the truth is that, and I'm not going to get into the full formalities today of how each payment's broken up. I think there's probably a little bit of reality that the ATO doesn't even know that. But a DPN doesn't include interest, and it doesn't include the penalties. So when companies are making a payment against the company account, only part of that goes to the DPN. The other part goes to interest and penalties, even from way back when. So we'll get back to those guys a little later in as we go. But what you were saying for our listeners is that it's a good idea to run through that exercise so that you can get a clear picture of just what's ahead of them.
Oh, that's right. And it's just another way to highlight the truth of the situation is to monitor that very, very carefully. And I think that's really just a big part of working with our clients through this type of situation, especially for our accountants. This is where we can add a lot of value is to work with them, put together some cash flows, meet with them monthly, even if via Teams or Zoom or what else have you, to check in, see how we're going to those cash flows, have a look at the MyGov account, how have the recent payments impacted on that. So I think it just helps because it really does keep your clients forewarned. And I guess if you're sitting there and as you're working through this situation for your client, if it's worsening, then quickly a phone call to us, we can have a bit of a look at that and go, righto, what can we do to make a difficult situation as good as we can.
Yeah, and I think I know with those guys, just the reality check that they weren't cutting it down as much as they thought has certainly changed their attitude on what they need to do. But what I want to do, Hank, if I can, is just we'll move away from that topic for a minute and something else that's become a really big issue, primarily in the last couple of months, but it's certainly starting to see a big impact, and I'm getting a lot of calls about it, and that is that the ATO is using their credit reporting powers.
Oh, definitely, and I think we're all getting inquiries from clients that are suffering from that. I'm working on one personally with one of our strategists at the moment, which is exactly that same position. So, in the past, I guess the ATO spoke about the ability to report to credit reporting bureaus. But really, in the last 3 to 4 months, they really seem to have decided to use this power and are using this power. It's a very well-run, systemised situation at the ATO where they're going through certain steps and they're doing that quite well.
So, and I think really it's interesting. Like that power's been there for 3 years or 4 years now, but the last 3 or 4 months they just seem to be smashing it through with a lot of vigor, using that as a power. So, and I know in the past, I think I've probably even spoken on this webinar about how I'm not sure that power of the. Originally, I thought the power of the credit default was probably not going to be as much as we thought, particularly for our clients, because once you know you're going into liquidation, it's not likely that you're going to borrow against that old company or what have you. So the power, its impact, I didn't think was going to be as major as it has been. What are you seeing? Where are you seeing that the real impact's coming from?
It can be quite devastating, and we I know that there's one, like I said, that I'm working on at the moment with one of our team. It's working in the building industry. They're okay; they can survive. They had a payment plan in place with the ATO. Some communication got lost along the way, and the ATO issued them with a default on their credit report. And what in turn happened is suppliers then stopped supplying them. So basically, just absolutely killed that business actually moving forward. Now, obviously, you can do COD and you can do all sorts of different things, but that's put them in a very, very precarious position. Now, I guess that like I said, was a particular concern. I think within 24 hours, 5 of those current suppliers rang up and said, look, they've stopped credit due to that default, and predominantly due to their insurance. So it's not necessarily the supplier, it's quite often the insurer in the background that's saying, no, no, no. And 3 of those suppliers were absolutely critical to get a major job completed, which would have allowed them to continue on making payments to creditors and so on and so on. So it really, really can have a major impact on businesses, instantly. And I guess that's one thing. While we spoke about it last year, it wasn't really being pursued. Now we're actually seeing those effects.
So, and again, most time people think about credit defaulting as, you're applying for new credit for new suppliers or something of that nature. Why you mentioned insurance is one reason why it's become an issue. But what else is meaning that these things are being picked up so quickly? I mean, most people wouldn't even know what their credit score is these days.
Yeah, look, I think companies or suppliers out there are just becoming more and more savvy. A lot of companies these days are using creditor watch systems. They're available through a number of different suppliers. And by having those in place, when something happens, then they're notified. And like I said, you're right, insurers, and especially in the building industry, are a big concern. But I know of companies out there that aren't insured, that do use creditor watch type systems, and that are monitoring that. So there's, I guess, a number of years ago, it probably wasn't as prevalent, but I guess without a doubt, because of the turbulent business scenery we're going to have for the next few years, because it's going to be, I can tell you now, it's probably it's a lot of businesses are going to be using that type of creditor watch thing. So I think it really is going to have a big effect, Ash, on businesses. And the ATO are really, it can have a massive effect. It can have a massive effect.
Yeah, I was reading the other day that business to business trade payment defaults have increased in the last 12 months by 55%. Now, normally that's in the trade space, and the ATO is relatively invisible in the past, but now it's become a really it's become more visible. And I think the other thing is that you might have a trade default with Bunnings, and people go, oh yeah, that's Bunnings or whatever. But now if you've got a default to the ATO, people get really scared and want to shut down working with you very, very quickly. So looking forward, what should our listeners be looking out for, and what should they know when they're talking to clients about what they should be looking for in the next 12 months?
Yeah, no, look, that's a good question. That's pretty easy to answer. There's some really good businesses out there that are going to thrive over the next period, but there's going to be a lot of pain, and we really think we're going to see that. There's a couple of things that have hit the press lately that I'd like to highlight, and I guess the average value of invoices from Australian businesses is declining. In fact, it's down about 19% on last year. Now, whether that's due to higher interest rates, less money being available, but whatever, it is down by about 20% or 19%. Credit inquiries are down significantly as trade activity is slowing. Court actions are up 18% year on year. So without a doubt, there's people out there that are collecting and pursuing and obviously defaulting. And I guess the current business failure rate is predicted to increase by 25% in the next 12 months. 25%, that's absolutely massive. So I think it's a pretty clear indication of what we're going to see over the next short period.
Yeah, so some very interesting numbers in there, and I think it's worth breaking down into a bit of detail on those. What's the conversation you're having with clients when you're looking at a stat like that? The average invoices are down 19%. Like, as our listeners, what should they be talking to their clients about?
Yeah, well, I guess that goes back to what we're talking about a little while ago, where we're talking about cash flowing businesses, having a look at what's the profit plans, can they afford that payment arrangement, and so on. And I think what interests me is our business is actually going to budget for that potential drop in sales. And if we assume the figures are close to correct, businesses will need to be able to stay profitable with that drop in revenue. And this means working with them, or accountants and advisors working with them to keep our eye on that. And that's where I was probably touching earlier on that month. If you've got a client that's in a bit of distress and you're working with them through that process, that's where I was saying that catch up on a monthly basis, even if it's via Teams or Zoom for half an hour, is worth looking at, and looking at those key indicators like sales and seeing if we've got an issue like that coming up. I think it will be quite comfortable for business owners to have that input from their accountants and so on, to be able to address that earlier rather than let that be problematic. So I think for the next 12 months, it's going to be very, very important to watch, because for most businesses, it won't take much to go backwards pretty quickly.
No, and I think, I guess the other part of that question is around the understanding your costs properly, isn't it? Like, how much are fixed and how much are variable? If your income's coming down, how quickly can you cut your costs to keep that profitable margin in place? But again, that's not really our area of expertise, but just something that I think is going to be really important. You can still be profitable with a 90% decrease in your income, as long as your costs can quickly come down to do that. So if we're looking at some of the other stats you mentioned there, you talked about court actions and business failures. What could you expand on in those two areas?
Well, I think for those that it's really about being aware. If you've got clients that are in a good state and that they don't have issues with tax debt or other creditors, it's just about being hyper aware of those those variables, keeping their eyes on it. If your clients' debtor days are blowing out, help them to have the courage to stop trading with some clients, or reduce trading terms to those particular clients. And quite often, I know that business owners are always keen to look after their clients and so on, but sometimes it's really, really important to rein them in or cut off some clients who aren't paying within those terms. And I think that is going to be really, really important moving forward. No business is going to avoid having a customer go into business failure. It's going to happen. If insolvencies are going to be up so high, it's going to happen. So I think it's just so important to mitigate that risk and exposure, is to keep on top of those payment terms, is going to be really, really important.
Awesome. Okay. The other thing I wanted to highlight, just for everyone listening, to be mindful of, is that because you have all these companies that are now getting credit defaults and they're being stopped supply because of various reasons, it doesn't have to be the ATO's version of it, but be mindful that companies that are in financial trouble are actually going to go and hunt for new suppliers. So when you're talking to your clients, be mindful if they go, "Oh, I've got all this new inquiry from new people that I could never get work out of." For me, that would be something that would actually be raise a fairly large alarm bell. That these new clients, that it may not be that they've got a greater sales technique. It may just be that they need to actually find a new supplier because the others aren't looking after them. So make sure that they're doing their due diligence on bringing on new customers. So I think a lot of today so far, Hank, has been trying to give some tips to everyone listening about what to help guide them through and how to help them help clients that may not need to come to us. But if they've got clients that do have tax debt, they are getting themselves into some creditor issues, and they're not in as good a state as some others, where do we come into that picture? What can we do to help them there?
Oh, I guess that's what it's having a plan B in place is really what it's all about, Ash. And I think restructuring the business through the use of a of an SBR, small business restructure, pre-pack or a VA can be a really valuable tool to get business right-sized and in the right position moving forward. Now, SBRs, look, they were new. They were brought out by the instigated by the government during COVID to deal with a big influx of insolvencies, and we're going to have those. That's clear. The SBRs are a very, very good product, actually, and especially in Queensland, there's some definite benefits there when we're dealing with the QBCC, which is for those that live in Queensland or deal in Queensland, it's the building authority up here, where the QBCC don't see it as an event of default, which they do on every other form of insolvency. So, and that means the loss of the builder's license, which can be very, very problematic moving forward. So, I think there are some really, really good tools available moving forward for businesses to use. Now, whether there's a DPN in place or not, they can be looked at to deal with some of the legacy and get it in a position to move forward.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and look, I think that plan B. I think anyone who's listened to me regularly on here would know that I use that term all the time, and I think it's still very much the critical thing to have in place for people in trouble, particularly when they're still holding on to a bit of hope. You protect the business, protect the future of the business, and then if the hope doesn't come off, we can deal with some of that legacy issues in a much cleaner and safer way, and over a period of time than trying to have to do it all in 5 minutes because you've got a creditor stat demand smashing down at you. But can I get you just to, I guess for the sake of our listeners, just have a run through a scenario of how you would do that?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, I'll talk about a file that I was working on with one of our team the other day. It's a smaller business. It works in the building industry. Has a master tax debt of circa about 600 grand. The business suffered over the last few years. A mixture of a number of different reasons. You could say poor management was one of them, but it doesn't matter. It's the accountants got involved. The business has got a clear future, employs a number of staff, and has got a good way moving forward. Now, the accountant has spent a fair bit of time in relation to looking at that business, and has helped the business owner do some detailed cash flows for the next 3 or 4 years. So it's clear that this business can, based on those cash flows, can continue on, and because it's being monitored reasonably closely by the accountant, the director's feeling much more comfortable and so on. So what we're planning to do with that business is a small business restructure. It's under $1 million of unsecured debt, which is one of the requirements. So we'll be okay as far as that's concerned. And we are proposing to put up an offer of around the 20 cents in the dollar mark. We're getting a number of these across at the moment. We got 2 across last week, one at 15 cents in the dollar, one at 20 cents in the dollar. So, a part of the process of going through that small business restructure is the small business restructuring practitioner is helping to talk to the creditors, predominantly the ATO, and work with them to be comfortable with the offer. So with this particular file, we're going to go ahead with a small business restructure. We'll put up an offer of around 20 cents in the dollar. One of the requirements that the SBRP, the small business restructuring practitioner, is going to require is some detailed cash flows, because they want to know that the business can afford to enter into this plan and will be able to afford to make the payments. So given the fact that we already had a fair bit of work done in that regard, that makes it a little bit easier. But that's the process that we're going to do with this particular company. Now, we believe that it's going to be successful, and we'll be able to settle that $600,000 odd worth of debt for about 120. That'll end up on a payment plan over 3 years, is what we're proposing. Maybe we may need to pin it back to 24 months. That will be part of the discussions with the creditor, the OTO, during the next few weeks. We, like I said, believe it'll be successful and it'll be accepted. And that will bring finality for that client. Now, the cash flow shows that can be afforded, so it's affordable, and that will be a good outcome. And most importantly, this particular client has got a QBCC license. So normally, if we would have done a liquidation and a pre-pack, for instance, that would have meant an automatic disqualification for 3 years on his builder's license. This small business restructure won't, and therefore it'll be a good outcome for the client.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, that's certainly a very interesting way of handling it. And I know it's not just Queensland that has the building. QBCC is probably one of the toughest ones. WA is pretty close second. But in New South Wales and Victoria, we have issues with insurances that can have the same impact as well. So it is a really good tool for that. That pretty much wraps up what we wanted to talk about, or what I wanted to cover off with you today, Hank. It's great to have you join me again.
Thanks, Ash. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. You love being on camera. I will open up if anyone has any questions. You can type them in the chat, or do your little doobie thing, raise your hand, and I think I can see that, and I can unmute you, and then you can ask a question if you have, big fella. Otherwise, we'll start to wrap things up. I'll give everyone a chance to type if that's what they need to do. While we're waiting to see if anyone wants to do that, just looking ahead, we will have another webinar again next month. I've got an external speaker coming in to hopefully give you some valuable insights into some areas. I'm not going to give away any secrets. You'll have to look out for the invite for who that is and what that is. And this year we're planning in the webinar to bring in a number of external experts in areas that we believe that you would like to get some extra guidance on. So it won't all be just about what we're doing and what's going on, although obviously we will continue to talk about that as well. But I think Hank, did you have anything you wanted to wrap up with or round out things with while we're seeing if anyone's got a question or two?
No. That's look. I'd like to thank everyone for their support over the years, and look, feel free to give us a call. The big thing about our service offering is, as you guys all know, we don't charge anything for our initial consultations and our initial meetings. So we love the opportunity to have a chat with you when you've got a client that's in some type of issue, even if you're working them through. Like if you're putting in some plans to monitor them moving forward, so we can have that plan B in place. But no, that's it for me, Ash. Thanks very much for having me on board for this one.
Problem. We have one question here, which is probably about as curly as I've had. Thank you, Kathy. What happens when ATO re-raise director penalty that they did not pursue over 10 years ago? What is the defence as the company liquidated so long ago? Yeah. Yeah, okay.
No, you can have that
one. Look, it's to be honest, it probably, there's a whole lot more detail in there, Kathy, than I could probably answer today. But one of the real risks of DPNs, and whether it be these lockdown ones where it doesn't matter whether the company's liquidated or not, if it's over 10 years ago, it would probably only be limited to PAYG. This GST only came in a few years ago, and it would do. There's been a number of changes to how the DPN regime has worked in the last 20 years, which may have some impact on what's available to do. But once a DPN's expired or is automatically expired, there's very little that can be done because it's been moved to personal. So they've taken it out of the company, and there's not much that can be done, obviously, with the company being liquidated. We actually had an interesting case the other day where DPNs were raised and the company was deregistered. So we've had to very quickly try and get it re-registered to try and liquidate within the 21 days. But Kathy, happy to give you a call, or you can give me a call and we can talk about it more specifically. But in general, there's very little that we can do apart from deal with it at the personal level. So we will wrap things up. Thank you for it's certainly the most curly question this year, and I think I could probably go back a couple of years and that would still beat it. We will wrap up now. So thank you very much. I guess from my point of view, guys, the webinars themselves, we're going to do our very best to try and provide you with some really good input from a number of people over the course of this year. We do anticipate, and all the stats are showing that it's going to be a really tough year. There will be businesses that will thrive through this, and there are going to be businesses that are going to struggle. But whichever way they are, there's things that we can do to help. So please reach out. As Hank mentioned, it's obligation free, and if you guys call us, then please, we're just here to have a chat and give you some ideas. We will then talk with the clients if we need to. If we don't, we don't. So please reach out to myself, Hank, or any of the strategists, and we will certainly give you what guidance we can. We will bring up the poll now. Hopefully my operator in the background will hit the button. There we go. So the webinar poll will be there. Be nice. Be nice or be nice at it, I guess, is what's the saying. Webinar work you put in relation to my previous message suggest messages. So I will look at that, John, and see what we can do to try and assist that situation. So we do have a few people who are using this as a great time to go for a walk. It would be handy if you could turn those your cameras off, because it can be a bit distracting. But I'll remember that for the future, John. Thank you for the input. All right, so I will we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time. We look forward to seeing you all next month online for those who are, and we'll hopefully see some of you in person as well over the next month. So have a great day, have a great week, and a great month. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.